Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, and we are back here in the Hendrickson Library at the Center for the Preservation of Western Civilization at ITR World Headquarters in Central Iowa. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow. You got John Hendrickson and myself here ready to thrill and excite you on another episode of the gold standard in Iowa conservative entertainment. That was take two, John. It's been a week and a half, and I'm out of practice. It's an ongoing theme here, but we're back. We're ready to go. Are you excited?
I am, yes.
Good.
Yeah. Yep.
Today is Monday, the 16th, and today is
President's Day.
Day.
Yep.
So you brought a guest.
I did, yeah.
To the show today.
Yes, yeah.
So would you like to introduce your guest to the listeners?
We have President Hoover with us, and
okay.
So hopefully he'll be a permanent addition to the podcast studio.
Well, we'll see. We're continuing to make improvements. I still would like to have some ITR signage in here.
Yeah.
My kids have like LED lights strung up all over their rooms. Maybe we could just do that and just turn it into like a disco party in here.
That would be. Yeah.
I don't know if Hoover's going to fit in that theme.
No, probably not.
That's the only thing. I just wanted to make sure that we got a plan.
I was inspired by your reference to the Dukes.
On our last episode?
Yeah, because they had a picture of Hoover on their desk.
They did,
and
so very good. John, trivia.
Yes,
we got a lot to cover today. We just got to get to it.
Well, we didn't have no one answered the question from last week.
I think I got it though, didn't I? Or I knew what it was.
You knew what it was, but
take us through it real quick.
So the question was, what was the major piece of legislation that Franklin Roosevelt introduced? In 1937.
He wanted to pack the court.
Yes, the Judicial Reform Bill, the court packing bill. Yep. And
was defeated.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a close call either.
No.
Right?
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and then,
I fully expect the left to come back with that.
Oh,
if
absolutely.
They win a trifecta. In D.C. But anyway.
And then our question for today, because it's President's Day, and it should be easy. And if I'll give listeners a hint, if you read the email newsletter that went out this weekend, the answer's in there.
Oh, okay.
And so the question is this. Last week, I believe Thursday, was Abraham Lincoln's birthday. So we're wondering, who was Abraham Lincoln's political hero? Who was Abraham Lincoln's political hero?
I have no clue on that one. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So another interesting piece, I just wanted to touch on this before we went any further. Robert Duvall passed away.
Yes, I just
found out that
lunch.
As we were getting ready to go on air. One of the great all-time American actors, 95 years old. You have a favorite Robert Duvall role, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay, well, tell us what that is.
He played Robert E. Lee in Gods and Generals.
Okay.
Did a very good job, outstanding. I thought he deserved an Oscar for that, actually.
Yeah. I haven't seen that, John.
Oh, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went through, he's been in so many things. Early in his career, probably most famous for appearing in The Godfather. Actually was in the original MASH movie.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. He was Frank Burns.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I didn't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But if I'm wrong, I apologize. A couple of movies that actually are my wife's really enjoys of Days of Thunder. He was the crew chief in Tom Cruise in the NASCAR movie. Gone in 60 Seconds. He was the Nicolas Cage's sort of mentor, partner in crime kind of guy. But two movies that I love that are of some of my favorite movies that he was in is Open Range.
Yes, that
you
is
ever
a
seen
good
Open
yes,
Range?
That is a good
I
one.
just maybe my favorite Western.
Yeah.
Kevin Costner, and he's a kind of an old cattleman, rancher type that gets involved in trouble in a town, and it's really an incredibly well done movie. And then Secondhand Lions.
Oh yes, I forgot about that. Yeah,
in Secondhand Lions, which is just fun.
Yeah,
fun for the whole family. I can't recommend those two movies enough.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Yeah, so go watch Secondhand Lions.
Who played his brother in that
Michael
one?
Caine.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that was a good. Yeah,
it's just great.
Yeah.
So my wife actually texted me and said, "Hey, Robert Duvall died," And my response to her was it a shootout or a plane crash?
Oh.
Because you expect him to go out, kind of
Yeah.
this epic, not that he was 95 at home, but anyway, so there's your assignment. Not only you have trivia this week, but you got some movies you got to go watch. John, we're going to get to in a minute. You have an article that's really well done. It's got a lot of information in it on property tax reform efforts around the country. But briefly, and I know you're probably not even ready to discuss this yet, but the annual TIF report came out today, tax increment financing. And I just wanted to mention it real quick because there's a lot of depth of detail, in there that we're not going to get into. And frankly, I wouldn't expect our listeners to dial in at that level. But did you look at it? I know you sent it on, but did you look at it at all?
I started to look at it, and I guess if I could draw some conclusions is just...
Before we draw the conclusions, let's just reset what TIF is.
Mm-hmm.
Tax increment financing. So just explain very briefly what TIF is, because we've done it before, but I want to reset it.
TIF in just simple terms, and I'm probably too simplifying it, but this is for me too. But it's a tool that local governments use for economic development purposes. Originally, it was used for slum, or what they call slum or blighted areas.
Urban renewal is what's in the code on this section,
And it's in a sense to incentivize those areas to develop them, because otherwise they would not do so on their own.
And the idea being is this is debt. This is if there is a project that is going to increase the value of the property so that it would generate more property tax revenue, that added amount you can borrow against the future property tax revenue of the development, right?
That's right, yeah.
So in theory, the argument would be is that it doesn't really cost anything, but it always does, because there could be development there anyway, and it becomes a tool and it becomes abused. So anyway, that's TIF. So this annual report comes out, which is required by law, and LSA publishes it, that says, here's what's going on with TIF in Iowa. Anything in there that jumped out at you or you think that people should know about?
Well, one thing is just the scope of how it's used is incredible. I think Iowa still is one of the leading states that uses this. But also one thing, and I need to dig into this because what caught my attention was there's one part in the report that basically said that a lot of cities are not, in a sense, paying some of this back, and it said it might be in violation of law, and that kind of was troubling to read that, and so I don't quite understand what that meant, but I think that jumped out at me right away because it was a large sum of money.
Well, the top line numbers, and if I've got this wrong, John, correct me, but almost $4.7 billion of debt right now in the state of Iowa just on TIF. That's about half the size of the state budget in a year, more or less half of the total amount of city and county budgets in the state of Iowa. I mean, that's a big number that is debt. And some of these projects don't come to fruition. And so that debt, we talked about, it's not always just a free lunch. We have some of the loosest TIF laws in the country. I don't know if every state uses TIF or has it enabled in their code, but most do. But ours are very permissive, both in what can be bonded against and what type of projects, how long those arrangements can be get on, and what you can use the money for. And what I think we've talked about in the past, John, which is in this report, and we'll dig into it some more, is how much of those dollars are simply given away to developers. It's not, hey, let's clean up a slum and blight area, or let's build some roads and infrastructure. I think some of the classic examples around Iowa, Jordan Creek Town Center here in West Des Moines was a cornfield, and they TIF'd it, put a bunch of roads up. Whether you like that idea or not, it laid the groundwork for future development. Probably we're going to get development in the west suburbs of Des Moines either way, but whatever. And the other one was that I always think of is the Iowa River Landing project. in
Yes.
Coralville,
Yes. Yep.
where cleaned up what really had been a brownfield or gray, whatever you call it, right? I mean, there was some environmental issues there, and they cleaned that all up. And now it was abused in that case as well because they just poached businesses from other communities to draw them in. But that's the kind of thing you think of with TIF. But what is happening in many of these other cases when you think about it, economic development, is just we're going to TIF a project and just hand it out to a real estate developer. So you want to build a building? Here's money. You want to relocate your office building from West Des Moines to Waukee? Here's some more money. And that seems like an abuse. But anyway, those numbers are all in there. And I know that you're going to want to take a look at that. We're going to work on it. And it's relevant because TIF is a live round at the Capitol this year. The governor has that in her property tax package, some reform on TIF, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in her bill. Yeah.
So hopefully we can, not that there's anything that's earth-shattering or new this year. I mean, it's an increase over the year before. Majority of the dollars do go towards economic development. Mm-hmm. So, and that is the part that I think the governor wants to get at. So anyway, I'm sure we'll have more to say about that, but you brought it up, so I thought I'd just throw it out there.
Yeah, no, it's interesting report, and it's just very complicated. And also, our colleague Dan downstairs was able to get me some information this morning, just on general economic development for cities, and for fiscal year 26, and just shy of $400 million is being spent on economic development.
Mm-hmm. And that's not the incentive package or the TIF part of that. That's just in straight property tax handouts.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Your tax dollars.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the assertion is that if we do anything to limit the growth in property taxes, is that police and fire and sewage in your basement. But yet there's $400 million going out the door just to incentivize people to build projects. And a lot of times those projects would be built anyway, even if that incentive wasn't passed.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard for me to believe that there wasn't going to be new construction in Waukee if we don't hand money out to developers. It's going to happen anyway. Supply and demand. And
I read a portion of that report, and it's basically said that a lot of times these TIF regulations don't have to have, a lot of times when the state has economic development incentives, they'll have at least requirements of X number of jobs. Otherwise, they have to pay that back. Mm-hmm. TIF does not.
Right.
And so I think that's another alarming thing.
Yep. Well, I do. So we'll have more to say on that, I'm sure. I do want to move on and give you plenty of time today, John, though, is this piece that you are working on. And I suspect that by the time folks are listening to the episode, this will be out and published. But Iowa is not the only state that is trying to get a hold of the growth in property taxes. And we're not even the only state that is contemplating caps in how much local governments can grow. And you've taken a look at that around the country. What have you found out?
Yeah, this has been very interesting because often we hear in the media that, this is the 2% cap in the governor's bill and the House bill and the Senate bill is just this extreme idea that's going to gut local budgets. And when you look across the nation, you're starting to see a lot of states looking at capping property taxes or limiting spending in different ways. And what's very interesting is states you would not expect this happening. So, for example, Vermont. And what's also interesting about Vermont and even New Hampshire is also kind of more of a libertarian state, but New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax, but they're looking at what's triggering the action in Vermont and in New Hampshire is public education. The cost of public education has been skyrocketing, driving up their property tax bills. And of course, what do we hear in Iowa all the time is, you can't touch public school funding. And let me just read a quote. This is from a state senator in Vermont, a Democrat, I believe, who chairs the state finance committee. I can't keep affording property taxes, and there's no place for me to downsize to accept maybe a senior apartment, which I'm not ready to do that yet. State of Vermont State Senator Ann Cummings, who chairs the state finance committee. And so she is working on a budget cap, a gradual budget cap. That's actually a bipartisan thing in Vermont with the governor. And what's interesting is that, like many states, Vermont also tried at first to use the state to buy down property taxes, and guess what? That didn't work. It failed. So you have in New York, Vermont and New Hampshire, 2 states in New England that are looking at budget caps to limit the growth in school budgets. Let's go over to New York. Very interesting. Probably not going to pass, but you have in New York Republicans proposing a series of bills. One at the state spending level would cap the state budget at 2%, or the growth of population plus inflation, and so that kind of matches their property tax cap, except at the state level. They're also looking at what I think is a very good idea, is a 2/3 majority requirement that would require a 2/3 majority vote for any tax or fee to be increased. Which I think is a very good idea in New York. And so that's in New York, which is, again, not these, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York are not necessarily the most conservative states.
I think what it does show, which we have tried to point out here, is this is not a Republican wish. This isn't that just Republicans or conservatives care about this issue. Is it cuts across the political spectrum. When you see blue states looking for solutions on this, they may not be quite the same way that the bill would be crafted, but this is a bipartisan problem. And,
it is.
And folks across the political spectrum are frustrated with their property tax burden. They're frustrated with it in Iowa, and they're frustrated with it across the country. So when you see it in places like Vermont and New York, that's real. Yeah.
In Connecticut, the candidate for governor on the Republican side, she's proposing a 2% property tax cap. It's almost like she was listening to ITR.
She might be
live. Yeah.
It's we're blowing up.
That's
it's getting
right.
big.
That's right.
It's possible.
And then in South Dakota, we're seeing movement. In Kansas, they're looking at a 3% property tax cap. In Tennessee, they're looking at a 2% property tax cap. And so let's see, and then of course here in Iowa, and then in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott is looking at a property tax cap of 3.5%, or limiting spending to population plus inflation, whatever is less. So
3.5 is kind of lame, isn't it, John?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
But it's at least it's something.
It's something.
But,
we can do too.
So
we've got
South Dakota has an interesting. The governor there is proposing basically what he would call a. It's not a buy down, but it would allow localities to switch out from their property tax to sales tax, but it would basically dedicate the sales tax money for strictly property tax relief. It would not go to funding. And so it's I'm not sure how that would work, but they're banking on what the bad part of that is. I think they're banking on tourism to do that, and I don't know if necessarily that's you can always do that.
Yeah, there's two things going on there that both folks need to be very skeptical of, which is levying one tax to replace another.
That's right,
because it just becomes a wash. And the other one is when you shift the burden to a different entity or different tax type. So it's almost two sides of the same coin of what's going on there. You're just trying to find a different way to pay for it. So if we say, for example, I know Nebraska really had a problem with this when they did their property tax bill. They just had the state pick up a huge chunk of this so-called relief. And we've cautioned against that in Iowa. If all you're doing is moving the burden on to the state general fund, for example, have you saved anything? Or you just it's who pays or out of what pocket? And what we have talked about, John, any real tax reform has to limit. Let me back up just a second. Any real tax reform has to save people money. Otherwise, what's the point?
That's right.
And any real tax reform to that end must reduce the overall broader cost of government. And that's the hard part. It's not hard politically to shift some things between, a property tax to a sales tax or to the state general fund, or this pays that. All of those things just change the formula. That's not what folks need. They need to not pay as much. So it's always interesting to see what folks are talking about around the country, because some of them are doing it. And I remember we've had a conversation with Sarah about what the Nebraska experiment has done, and it hasn't worked the way they want. And the other thing that's really dangerous on that too is if you don't restrain the local governments and all you do is change who pays, they end up just continuing to grow.
That's right.
And there's not even that corresponding slowdown in the growth of government. It just continues on unabated.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cautionary tales in this when you look around the country as well.
I'm glad you mentioned Nebraska, because I forgot to mention them. They also have a 2% cap bill that's moving through the legislature. But the other thing I think what we're seeing too is that in a lot of these states, they have tried various property tax reform measures, just like you were talking about. They have all failed, whether it's switching one tax for another, or shifting more to the state general fund, or a lot of states are for some reason they think assessment limits are the way to go, and none of these work. And so they're finally coming to the realization that, wait a second, the budgets are keeping increasing, spending's keeps increasing, so maybe we should start at least and let's look at reality. It's not cutting spending, it's slowing the growth. Yeah. And so I hate to say that, but I mean it's not like they're cutting budgets, it's slowing the growth of spending, it's getting it under control at a reasonable rate.
Right. Well, I guess listening to your recap of what those other states are doing, I feel really good about where Iowa's at right now.
Yeah.
That our reform proposals all look like they would be better than most of those.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they're mainstream. I mean, this is, and that's, I think, is so frustrating with, some of the voices out there painting these bills as being heartless or going to gut local governments. It's just not true. I mean, that's why the Register's editorial was so ridiculous. Of
what this sometimes comes down to is, and we're seeing this more and more creeping into our politics, that it's not right versus left, it's not Republican versus Democrat, it's people versus government, and more people are awakening to that. And so that's why I try to come back to that idea. Is this, the focus needs to be what works for people, not where it works for government. If we are constantly, if the terms of the debate on this are what works and doesn't work for government, then we're lost, because government's always going to want more of our money. But across the political spectrum, people are skeptical of government. They believe that government doesn't give them the value for their tax dollar investment that it should give, and they should be able to expect good services at a better price.
I was on a meeting last week and talking about property tax reform, and it was interesting because everyone kept focusing on how are these bills going to impact local government. And one thing you've always said is about our organization is we're here for the taxpayer, and no one was asking about who's going to stand up for the taxpayer. Everyone, and that's the other frustrating part. I'm so sick and tired of these local officials saying, well, we need a seat at the table. They have 10 chairs at the table, and it's the taxpayer that's sitting at the card table in the basement. I mean,
the kids' table.
Yeah. And so it's time for the
right
taxpayer to come up, and they need to go to the kids' table. And
I believe that look, the how bills impact the functions, the operations of local government should be heard. It should be a factor, because I do think, as much as the majority of Iowans, I'm actually agreeing with you, John. It's just I'm taking a roundabout way to get there. I know that 70% of Iowans want a 2% spending limitation because we've pulled that and tested it, and that's what they've said. But I also think that Iowans want a good range of the essential functions of government to be delivered and delivered well. They want that. I want that as a taxpayer. I want a safe neighborhood. I want to be able to call 911 and have a fire truck and an ambulance in an emergency show up at my house. I want the streets cleared in the winter. Those are the essential core functions of government. All we're saying is that as we understand that we're going to make sure those work, there's always people that have to pay for it. And that has to be front and center. And we mentioned this earlier, when you got $400 million going out the door in economic development incentives, the arguments start to ring hollow when you're asking people to just write the check and be quiet because you don't understand how local government budgets work. And so that's where the frustration comes, is you can see it. And it's that coming back to that idea of the needs of people versus the needs of government, and that government shouldn't just be on autopilot. Government shouldn't be left to serve its own interests without considering as paramount the governed, who are the only reason they get to do anything is by the consent of those folks that are paying the bills. So, yes, I have no idea what the original thing was that got me on that rant, but here we are.
No, I was just reflecting on how you often hear local officials say, "Well, we need to have a seat at the table," and it's they do have a permanent seat at the table, and it's I think it's the. And often you always hear, how is this? It always comes back to them, but it's never, I think, there's, this time around, I think the focus needs to be on the taxpayer.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I mean.
Look, I agree with you. That whole seat at the table thing, it rings real hollow. Because not only are the army of paid lobbyists on behalf of local governments that exist at the Capitol, but the built-in grassroots network that they have to lobby legislators back in their home district. If you are a rural legislator that represents a county or two, you've got all those supervisors. How many cities and mayors and city council people are in your district that are also lobbying you on behalf of that? And there's some great ones out there that are like, hey, you know what, maybe we should limit it, because we've talked to those folks. But again, and if you're a legislator and you've got the mayor in your community who is, and the city manager who are pounding you on leave us alone and local control and all the other things, and you have just the regular taxpayers in the community, sometimes those mayors, those city managers, those supervisors, they come armed with a lot of information because it's their job, and it's easy to forget those individuals. Now, to your point, John, though, I think this time it feels like it's a little bit different, that the taxpayer actually is coming first on this. And they have spoken up because, as I've said, the source of all of this is that in the last election, a lot of legislators were out knocking on doors, and they showed up on people's doorsteps. And over, those people said, you got to do something about my property taxes. And at some point, that demands a response. And I believe that we are in a cycle at the Capitol this year where that voice is being heard. And so I'm encouraged.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
I want to just switch topics real quick if I could. Yeah. And another kind of going back to the trends here that we're talking about, but there was another article I just finished. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I think it's worth mentioning because it ties in, and that's the opposite of what's going on. And so we're talking about the states that are looking at ways to cut taxes, but I also did one on states that are increasing taxes. And what's interesting is there's several states that are actually engaged in increasing taxes, especially wealth taxes. And I think we need to pay attention to that here in Iowa because, I don't foresee that in the near future, but you never know. We need to pay attention to this. And so, for example, you have our usual suspects of California, Minnesota, Illinois, Rhode Island, just to name a few. They're all looking at Washington, all these wealth taxes. Mm-hmm. these are states that have repeatedly, year after year, legislative session after legislative session, continue to increase spending and raise taxes, and they're all facing budget shortfalls. And so it shows you that, again, what's the problem here? It's not necessarily revenue; it's their spending. Yeah. Now, in California, they haven't even passed. It's going through their initiative process, so it hasn't even been approved yet, and already their wealthy people are leaving, and so it's already scaring people away, and so I we're seeing this in a sense, even in Virginia, the new governor of Virginia, who is supposed to be a moderate, is trying to push through a whole series of new taxes, and it's just that's bad policy, and that leads to budget problems, and the oftentimes they think that the way to raise revenue is to increase taxes and to tax the wealthy, and it doesn't work.
Well, we will see that play out over the coming years and decades.
Yeah.
States like Iowa that have made tremendous progress in holding a line on taxes, cutting them, creating an environment that's friendly for business, friendly for taxpayers, for people to start to move to Iowa to start a business. You will see that yield benefits for the people in the state, for the businesses, and for their state. And in these other states that are raising money, you see people leaving. You see less economic vibrancy. It will be borne out in the data, and that whole idea of states being laboratories of democracy.
Yes.
We're going to find out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. And I think even going back to Iowa with the property tax issue, I still think that everyone talks about economic development and growth, especially at the rural level. Let's reduce the property tax burden and let's see what happens. I think that's the pro-growth thing that we need at the rural level.
Yeah.
And we've had events where we've had business leaders say that specifically to us.
Yeah. It's a major issue. It's been a major issue, and it continues to grow. And like I said, I am optimistic that we are going to get a good bill this year out of the legislature to start bending the curve down on what government costs at the local level. So, John, it's kind of warm in here.
It is, yeah.
It is, it's that time of year.
Yeah.
I noticed it at home this weekend. It's real nice outside today. Sun's beating here on the windows of the studio, and it's a little toasty in the studio.
Yeah.
So I think the quality is going to start to decline here
so.
in the episode if we keep going.
I should have brought a pop instead of coffee.
You should have.
Yeah.
I'm powered by Dr. Pepper Zero today, and I feel like it's the one thing that allowed us to get through this episode and get the folks something that they deserved. So, with that having been said, John, it's time to sign off.
Yes.
So, all right, folks, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to answer the trivia question. Don't forget to watch Secondhand Lines and Open Range. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.